Okay, guys, this is Toru, and he's going to introduce himself, explain what his name means, and tell us about his story.
Okay, my name is Toru, first name T-O-R-U. Toru means man of conviction. Saito, S-A-I-T-O, means the way to grow. Sai means to grow, To means the way.
Okay, and
I was born in San Francisco, in Japantown, because Japantown was the only place the Japanese were allowed to live, because Japanese were not allowed to live or rent in any place else. Chinatown was where the Chinese were only allowed to live. And next door to Japantown was the Fillmore district, where only the African Americans were allowed to live. And when I was born 12/11/37. When I was 4 years old, that's when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and suddenly we became the bad guys, and we were sent originally to the Tanforan racetrack. It was a horse racetrack for horses, and so we lived in They built barracks, and they also used the stables for the horses where we lived. And then they shipped us from there to a place called Topaz, Utah, which is out in the middle of the severe desert, S-E-V-I-E-R desert. And I was 4 years old when we first went to camp. I was almost 8 when we left. Topaz closed on Halloween of 1945, and we left just before, And because San Francisco, Japantown was occupied by African Americans, who were the only ones who were willing to live where we lived, that we couldn't return to our homes because the African Americans couldn't move any place because nobody wanted them to live next door to them. So the government put us into Hunters Point, which was the Navy shipyard in San Francisco. But those were dormitories. Each room had 2 single beds and a dresser, and we were 9 children and mother and father at that point. So the government, after 1 year of that, moved us to Richmond, California. Richmond, California was wall-to-wall federal housing projects, these cheap buildings that were made temporarily for the shipyard workers, for the Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California. And it was completely segregated. It was all white, and then there was a little area where the African Americans lived. And the government cleared out some white people around the blacks, and they put us there. And I was 7 years old, and we lived there for 10 years until I was 17. And we grew up with the blacks were sympathetic, for they were from the South, and they weren't about to discriminate against black, Japanese people. But the people who lived behind us were the whites from mostly from Oklahoma, and that's the first time I ever heard of the word Okie. Found out they were from Oklahoma, and these were people who were uneducated, and they were very, they were ignorant, and they were very prejudiced, and they hated Japanese because they thought the Japanese were the enemies of World War II. But I was an American Japanese, but they didn't know that or care about that, so they kicked our ass, and it made life miserable for us. They called me, a dirty Jap all my life, and I grew up hating the fact that I was Japanese. And I used to pray to God. I used to be a Christian back then, and I used to pray to God, and I used to say, Lord, let me wake up in the morning with blonde hair and blue eyes so people would leave me alone, But I guess God was busy, and he never could answer my prayers, so I grew up a Japanese American. And I suffered because it wasn't okay to be Japanese back in those days. Today it's different. Everybody drives a Japanese car, everybody watches a Japanese television, and it's okay to be Japanese. Even white kids eat sushi now. And so it's different from what it used to be. And I grew up in the bad days when I hated myself for being Japanese. I wish I had, I wish I were white, so people wouldn't persecute me. But I've had a lot of therapy, and I'm trying to learn that it's okay to be who I am, and because I have no control about that anyway. And if I can't love myself, nobody else is going to love me. So I'm happy that today people see Japanese people for what we really are. We're good people, we obey laws. And how many times do you hear about a Japanese being put in jail for breaking the law? We pay our taxes. We're good citizens. We beautify our country. We beautify our neighborhood, etc. And so I have a friend of mine who always says to me, Toru, why do they hate us so much, And people hate us because they believe in the prejudice that Japanese are bad people, we bombed Pearl Harbor, blah, blah, blah. And unlike the Japanese from Japan, I'm a Japanese American, I just happen to have Japanese ancestry in my background. But I'm a good American citizen, and I've never been in jail, I've never been arrested, I worked hard, I own property, I obey the laws. And I love everybody. I don't care what color you are, because we're all human beings, And I hope the heck that your fifth grade?
Fifth grade.
Fifth graders will learn that, no matter what your parents say or what your friends say, we're all human beings. We all love the same things. We love our mother and father. We want to go to school and educate ourselves to be good citizens of this country. And I think together, we can do that if we can only forget the prejudice that people put in our heads. I grew up hating white people because all the guards around the camp were white, and they never smiled at us. They had guns, rifles with big blade, knife blades sticking at the other end. I was scared to death of them. But I found out later that they're human like I am. They had to do their job, and I think only with learning to love one another, we're going to make this country a better place for everybody. Because there's no good and bad in people, except for what we're taught, and mostly what we're taught is not really true. We're taught that black people are no good; they're a bunch of criminals. Japanese, you can't trust them, and when you really think about it, we're all human beings. But Japanese especially, we try our best to be good citizens, and we obey the laws, like I said. And hopefully, I hope someday I'll be able to meet your fifth grade kids, and we can all put our arms around each other and know that we're all good human beings.
Thank you.